Welcome back to the Physique Development Podcast. Before we dive into things, I want to make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And then I also want to talk about the fact that we are giving away free coaching. Go ahead and head over to the Physique Development Instagram. It'll be linked down below, but you'll be able to find out exactly how to apply for free coaching. We are giving away 3 months of free coaching, and it opens on the 10th of March 10th, and it's going to March 14th. So if you're listening to this before Friday on the 14th, then make sure that you've head over to the Instagram to apply for the scholarship. Catch you on the inside. Alex, you ran a little poll on your story the other day, and it was all about what we're actually going to talk about today. So why don't you enlighten us on what all you talked about on your story?
Yeah, so I started a dieting phase yesterday, and in doing so, I spent a lot of time on my story, which is uncommon for me. I do not spend that much time on my story, and put some polls up and talking about the phase that I was in prior to getting into the fat loss that really allowed for me to guarantee the success of the fat loss phase that I'm getting into. And what that phase is called is a calibration phase. And as I started to talk more about it on my story, we had a lot of people reach out and ask if I would do a little bit more of an in-depth conversation with Sue on what that calibration phase really entails, because I gave some cliff notes on my story yesterday, but we can give a whole lot more detail here today. So I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, I am as well, because we actually had this conversation a few weeks ago when you were getting into this calibration phase, talking about how so many people fail at fat loss, not because they don't work hard, but because they start from a place of chaos. And so you and I were chatting and talking about how we both wanted to get into a diet here soon. And then we had talked about what this phase was going to be and how to lay it out. And it's something that I'm excited to be able to share because we got a lot of great feedback from the client case study episode. And so being able to talk about something else that we implement with clients makes me really excited to dive in.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get into it, where the calibration phase is the most beneficial. And what is the calibration phase? And if I was to define this, I would say that it is a set time frame. Now, this can be as short as need be, depending on what the person is needing, and it can be significantly longer, because this is all about creating foundation within your habits. And we're thinking of a dieting phase as almost building a house, and we want to be able to build a house on a very strong foundation. And that foundation is going to be made up of our habits. And if we get into a dieting phase and we don't have a strong foundation within our habits, we're going to be starting from a place of chaos, starting from a hole of deficit that we're trying to improve upon, and then also do so with less resources at our fingertips to make these things happen. And so this is all about setting the stage properly to have the most successful dieting phase possible.
Because we see a lot of diets fail. And so being able to look at the reasons that those diets fail makes all the more sense as to why you would go ahead and do something like the calibration phase. Because oftentimes, like you mentioned, people start in a hole, and you can't fix that chaos by adding more chaos. And then people also have the I'm just going to eat less mentality. And that can just backfire so hard because you don't even know where you're starting from. Less is going to be so relative. And if you're not tracking anything, then there's no true way to know what that looks like for you. And then the last thing we see is that people just assume that motivation is going to equal readiness. So it's like this illusion of starting strong, but then that motivation fails and it feels like it just kind of sputters out as far as what those goals look like. So then it feels like you start and stop a ton of times as well. And so it's kind of like if you're trying to just jump into a deficit without knowing where you're starting from or having that starting place, it's like trying to run a marathon without even training for it.
Sure.
Which would be so dumb.
It'd be very dumb. Oftentimes when people get into a deficit, there's something that triggers that response of I need to do this. It may be a vacation that's coming up and it's I'm going to be in a bathing suit and I want to look better and feel more confident and not avoid the camera. And often when that is triggered, it's at a place where you are it's too close. Like it's right around the corner. You've got to make change.
It's like a week away and you're like, oh crap, I got to lose 20 pounds.
It's crash time. So that's one situation. The other is that summer in general is coming around, and again, too close. And generally when that, if we're doing it in a reactive state, we are not set to get into it. And that's what we're getting into today. The other is that it is coming from an emotional position of, I don't feel comfortable in my body. I don't like how I look in my clothes or how my clothes are fitting. And it's time for me to get into a deficit. And those individuals are the ones that will often run into the deficit and say, it didn't work for me, or it didn't go fast enough, or I gained all the weight back. And often we can draw those things back to not having a strong enough foundation going into the deficit itself. And so what the even greater foundation of the calibration phase is just complete and utter honesty with yourself of where you're really at, not where you think you are at. Where are you truly at? And if you don't have real data to pull from, well, I'm sorry, you're not in a place to get started with a deficit. If we're just going to be plucking things out of the air of possibility of like, I feel like this, or this worked for me last time, that is not going to be a recipe for success. And you're running a greater risk of going through all of this and challenging your body and putting it into a greater stress state for very suboptimal results, if any results. Why waste your time? I don't get it. So in that situation, this is where the calibration phase comes in to tremendous benefit. You have the thought, okay, I want to lose body fat. Great. What are we looking at from a habit perspective that you know is going to require you, or is going to be required of you as you get into the deficit? Things like the quality of your sleep. How are you going about your sleep? Are you getting to bed at a consistent time? And I'm not saying right at 9:30, your eyes are closed and you're dead asleep every single night. Are you getting to sleep between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, for example? Are you waking at a similar time? Are you waking at 5:30, 6 o'clock in that window of time on a regular basis? That's going to be something that you want to keep in line. If you are having consistent fluctuations within your sleep, you're going to bed at 11 o'clock or midnight, and then some nights you're going to bed at 10 because you're exhausted and you're waking at random times, that's not going to be a good foundation for you to pull from getting into this deficit, and it's going to hold you back in having the habits in place for the fat loss to occur.
And just a note, like this calibration phase isn't just spending time at maintenance. It's proving that you can execute that foundation and those habits consistently. And I also I know you and I talk about this a lot, but if you can't stay consistent when you're eating higher food, what makes you think that you're going to do better with less? Like, again, you're stressing your body more, you're putting more on your body, demanding more out of yourself when you haven't even nailed those things down. And there's also a theory called the expectancy value theory. I was trying to sound that out in my head a little bit there, but it is really talking about the fact of you can't change what you don't measure. And again, it's not going to set you up for the most success. So if you believe a diet will get you results, but you don't have a clear starting point, your ability to follow through will be lower because your efforts won't be as effective. So again, gathering data first increases your belief that your actions will lead to success. And what your belief in your success is also just as important of that confidence, because like you said, there's a lot of people going into these situations being like, it never works. I never lose weight. This is just how things are for me. You've already lost. Like, you have already put this on yourself that you're not going to actually see the results out of it. And so you also are not setting yourself up for that success. And dieting isn't just about that willpower that most people think it is, that they're just like, I just don't have willpower. It's about setting up that success and building that foundation to allow everything to be way easier than you make it.
So I hadn't got into the calorie point yet, but I was working my way there. So Sue's letting everyone know that we're going to be eating at maintenance in the calibration period. I think that the bigger part to focus on is not just simply eating at maintenance, but getting the foundational habits in place, and eating at maintenance is going to make that easier. So let's go ahead and get back to the habits specifically so that we can have the foundation that's in place. So the sleep is the first thing. The second thing is going to be making sure that we have a consistent amount of steps that are in place on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't have to be 10,000. If you are looking at your watch and it's 3,000 every day, just increase by 2,000 and have that consistency in place and show yourself that you can do it at 5,000 or 7,000, whatever it may be. It does, like, everyone gets caught up in 10,000 is exactly how many I need to get for fat loss. And it's not necessarily that. It's just a matter of making sure that it's equated and consistent on a day-to-day basis. Then we want to look at your training. Are you consistently going to the gym as much as you want to when you get into the deficit? This should not be something that you're overhauling as soon as you start the deficit of like, I'm working out 2 or 3 days per week and it's kind of sporadic and I don't have anything tracked in a logbook. And when I get into the deficit, I'm going to be training 5 days a week. Like, that would be problematic, because then you're going to have poor recovery because of the increase in volume, but then you're also going to have poor recovery because you don't have enough nutrients to recover from the increase in training. So that would be problematic there. So, and then also looking at your overall intensity to your training. Is this something that you have a strong foundation of going into the deficit and you are seeing progress in the gym and chasing the logbook on a regular basis? Looking at water intake and then getting into the nutrition being even greater foundation. Because again, if you are expecting yourself to do these things on a day-to-day basis over, if you're dieting for 12 weeks, it would be 90 days. You're expecting yourself to be 100% on with those things at less food. You should be able to do that at maintenance for as long as you need to going into that period of time with far more ease because of the resources that are available to you. So, and I think that it's a really good proving point. There are situations where clients come to us and they are wanting to diet, and we set them up in this calibration phase to get started so that we have a good foundation to pull from. And they will lose maybe 5 to 10 pounds in this window of time and realize that getting into a true deficit is not necessary for them. They realize that they just needed to have better structure to their habits, better structure to their training, better structure to their nutrition, better structure to taking care of themselves, rather than getting into a calorie deficit. And the deficit wasn't the answer. It was more of just simply taking care of themselves.
Low reps is best.
High reps is best.
Fruit is so
It's
good.
terrible for you.
You should lift heavy.
High reps,
Carbs
low
are
weight.
needed.
Keto
Squats
for
are
life.
bad for your
Squats
knees.
are great
You
for your
should
knees.
squat ass to
Knees over
grass.
toes.
It's fine. It fits my
Macros is for
macros.
idiots.
When there are so many mixed messages going around, it's hard to know what you should even do or focus on. But that's exactly where Physique Development one-on-one coaching comes in. You might have heard of online coaching or even hired a coach before, but we believe in teaching you the why behind what we do while truly taking your life into consideration. We want to train, educate, and empower you to reach your goals and help you to stop spinning your wheels and just finally feel good. And hey, we're here to help you look good too. You need you. Your health is your wealth. So join Physique Development and let us be the last coach you ever need. With this calibration phase, the most important part with nutrition is just being able to track everything. Because I know that there's a lot of people that they might have macros assigned to them and they're like, oh, I've been tracking, but how close to that 100% have you truly been tracking? And if you're half tracking at maintenance, then you're going to be underreporting in a deficit. And so we want to just have that understanding of what that baseline is. So for me, I just started my calibration personally, and it was really just about I've been 5 or 6 days in tracking everything that I eat, not aiming for specific macros for me currently right now because I haven't been tracking macros for about a year. And so it's just about, I know roughly where I am, but just to get it all out on paper. And it was great because even the other night I realized I was eating way more protein than I thought I was some days. And there were some days that were a little higher and lower, even though I felt like I was eating the same things every day. And so really just being able to track everything and be able to get those numbers for about a week or two is going to be so beneficial.
Yes. Figuring out where you're at. And I would say that if you're not actively tracking, just eat as closely as you normally would. By getting the app out and putting everything into the app, you're going to find that you're going to be a little bit more on point than what you normally would be on a day-to-day basis just because of the habit itself. But doing your best to give you that place, because here's a big spot where people run into issues when they get into a deficit is that they are eating far more than they think they are. And so then they pull the deficit from where they think their calories are at. And so then instead of it being a 300 or 500 calorie deficit from where they believed their calories were, it's actually an 800 or 1,000 calorie deficit from their average, because they were just consuming a lot more bites and licks, as we call them, within, handfuls of food, the snacks and things of that nature that just went untracked or really unthought of as they were maybe preparing a meal or something along those lines. And so getting that base of understanding of where your food is really at, including like the sauces and the oils and those different things, is a tremendous help just to be able to have, again, the strong foundation to set yourself up for the fat loss phase.
And I'll add even one more thing as far as the habits is just when we're talking about nutrition, also talking about meal timing, because that's something that I've noticed over this past week of getting into it, of even just being so much better with my meal timing, even though I'm not changing the amount of food that I was eating or doing something special, I already feel so much freaking better. My sleep is better, and all these other habits have improved just because of that meal timing, because I was eating my meals a little bit too close together and a lot of them in the later half of the day and too close to bed, and just being able to change that around a little bit within a foundational habit has helped a ton.
Yeah. Getting them put into your calendar, I think, is a helpful piece, especially for people who are just very busy throughout the day. And I'll use two different examples here of the busy business person of having too long of stints where they're going without meals and then having to just shovel food down their throat in the evening and having to get as much of their calories as possible into the evening, which is just skewing their data in the morning within their scale weight, as well as probably skewing their digestion, as well as the quality of their sleep. So we want to avoid that. And so for that person, putting it into your calendar and being realistic with yourself of what's capable to be consumed in those time slots. Like if you don't have the bandwidth or the time to be able to consume a fully, this is going to sound super bro, but like chicken, rice, and a vegetable meal, for example, like a real meal. And it would be better for you in that situation to have a shake and something light within fruit or something along those lines. Like that is still going to be better than you pushing all your calories off until the evening. As much as it would be great to have a full meal at that time, your schedule does not allow for that. And that's okay. You're creating the best thing for you, not what's best by a textbook. And then you have another example with maybe a mom who is running her kids to school, and then after school, they have their baseball practice or whatever the case may be. And so you probably just have to have more things prepared, and you may have some smaller meals throughout the day that may resemble more of a snack potentially. But as long as we're getting 20 to 25 grams of protein within those sittings, we can still make it work. And so everyone's structure is going to look different. And those two examples where I have clients that fit those categories, but I also have clients who fit other categories where they may have 6 meals or 4 meals or 3. It just depends on what the structure is going to be best for you and your schedule. And guess what? It can change. Your schedule is going to change. You're going to go through different chapters of life. And so you're going to have different approaches to take care of your body.
The last habit I really wanted to talk about here is internal health. And specifically for all of the women listening, if you are not having a regular menstrual cycle outside of if you are not supposed to because you have an IUD or something like that, if you are not having a regular menstrual cycle, being able to make sure that that's in place, because you don't want, again, your body to be fighting you. You don't want your routine to be fighting you. You don't want to be fighting yourself. You want to make this as simple as possible. And so being able to see to make sure everything internal is going well is just going to be able to set that baseline up even better.
Yeah, I think that being able to run thyroid panel and being able to look at sex hormone production, as well as looking at blood glucose levels, all going to be helpful. Because if you have something going on within insulin resistance, within the blood glucose, or you have something going on within underproductivity or overproductivity within your thyroid, you want to get those things addressed. And getting into a deficit, if those things are off, is going to exacerbate those issues. And so even if you don't think that there's anything going on or anything off, it's just good to have that reassurance that you're starting from a clean slate and at an even playing field before you get into the deficit.
So let's go ahead and talk about your calibration phase a little bit more. So how long did you run your calibration phase for?
I had mine in place for 4 weeks.
And would you say that's about the average that you have in place for clients or for other people?
No, I would say it was fairly short for in comparison to clients, because it just depends on how many of those habits need work, as well as how quickly they're able to get those things into place. For instance, for myself, I was able to get those things rolling pretty quickly. It was a dusting off of the tools, not a creation of tools. And so getting those things back in place was like riding a bike type situation.
And what did it look like? Did you see any weight loss, or what were the main things that you noticed throughout this as far as how your physique or your energy changed or anything like that?
So, well, before we even get into the benefits, I think it's important for me to talk about which ones I probably spent the most time on. Sleep was the biggest one outside of nutrition. Like getting nutrition 100% in line, sleep was probably the biggest thing. And so getting to bed at the same time is huge. Like prior to this, I was in a phase of work where I was just pushing work way too late, which was then pushing back my meals. And by pushing back my meals, it pushed back the time that I went to bed. This is a very vicious cycle that can catch you really fast. So getting out of that was really big. And then once I got that into a more corrective position, then it was really focusing on nutrition and getting back to tracking consistently. And that was probably the thing that I saw the best shift with, because by doing that, and what I was doing prior to with nutrition was just eating intuitively. I was still having the same amount of meals. I was certainly just snacking more than what I am now. Like just cleaning up the extra snacking had me feeling tremendously better, because I had better spacing between my meals. And that also just allowed for me to have better overall digestion and probably absorption of the nutrients that I was consuming, all those different factors. So getting nutrition into alignment, and then that helped tremendously within my energy and how my body looked as well. Mm-hmm. So my getting my sleep in check and getting my nutrition in check were the two biggest rocks. And then the third rock was my steps being consistent, because I would have days where I would be like 7,000 to 10,000 steps, but then I would have days where I was glued to my desk and had maybe 2 to 3. And so getting that fixed as well was big. And if I was to say the most challenging of all those, it was the steps.
Yeah.
The steps was easily the hardest.
Well, I think that one thing within food, especially with us both mentioning of we are intuitively eating and not tracking and I'm just very passionate about this in general, but intuitive eating doesn't mean that you don't prep food anymore. You have no plan for your food and you're just kind of eating as the wind takes you throughout the day. You and I intuitive eating might not look the same as other people intuitive eating we have been eating the same breakfast. We have meals prepped each week, ready to go. And then we have like different snacks that weave into that. So it was something that felt like a lot easier step because we already had other parts of the foundation within the food, and we're just able to make some small changes there to get into things. So that's something when we look at that time frame of really asking yourself, can I even be consistent with these things and get into any of this before being able to take that step? Because it really is so freaking hard as soon as you start cutting away calories. And that's also what we see a lot within people who hate tracking, is that they only ever track when they're in a deficit, which would make me hate it too, because it would just feel that much more restrictive.
Yeah. I mean, if you're only doing it, and generally when those people are getting into a deficit, it's because they despise how they look at the time. So they're having this negative association with tracking. Like tracking is a chore because it's only something I do when I don't like how I look. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as I start liking how I look, I stop using this thing. And so if we're only having this singular association with it, of course you're going to hate it. Why don't you do it in a time when you are loving how your body looks? Maybe when you finish a diet and you love how you look, maybe you track your nutrition continuously in a way that you're trying to nourish your body. You're trying to figure out what is that calorie set point that I feel my absolute best, that I look and feel my absolute best. Because when you're at the end of a dieting phase, you may look losing the body fat that you wanted to, but you may not be in the best place energetically. You may not be in the best place within your performance in the gym. And so after that, now you're on a quest. Okay, now that I've figured out where I need to be within my body fat, can I match the body fat with my performance and my energy? Is that even possible? It's a self-discovery for yourself. And by going on that pursuit, this allows for you to disconnect that singular connection of negativity to tracking and have some fun with it. And so I think that's an important piece of the puzzle.
So for yourself, you ran it for the 4 weeks. You said that steps were definitely the hardest there, but you got into a good groove with that. So what was the scale difference for you during those 4 weeks?
I think it was that I went from 227 down to 221.6, I think is exactly where it was. And as I've gotten into the first couple of days of the deficit, I've done the scary thing that everyone would be so scared. My scale weight has gone up.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. You lost all that weight without dieting and then you diet and the scale goes up.
I know.
It must mean it's not working and you need to cut calories really quickly and do more cardio.
Yeah. Or I slept 5 hours last night.
Oh, that's crazy how those variables really work.
I know, it's crazy.
Okay.
And I know we just talked about how we focused on these habits to get my sleep into place. It's as much as I would love to sit here and be like, I am perfect and I sleep excellent every single night. There are attenuating circumstances that don't allow that to happen every time. Yeah. And we just work through it. And tonight, I promise you, I will sleep a lot better.
And that's the thing of just us joking about that is it's so easy to get caught up. And again, you step on the scale. Once you start the deficit, it's not moving the way you want. And to immediately go to, I need to be doing more. I need to be adding more when you do need to be more, but it's more consistent instead of just adding more and more to your plate.
And I also think it's a good indicator of why you should get on the scale every day, just to get readings and disassociate the emotional connection that you have to the scale as it's just another data point, and honestly a small one at that. I have a lot more things that really give me feedback of if I'm in the right direction than what the scale is. It's just one of the few tracking metrics that I use. Measurements and photos honestly mean more to me than what the scale readings do, as well as my performance in the gym, where my energy is at, where my performance in my workspace is. All those different factors are all going into consideration. Are you sick and tired of your glutes not growing? Turning around in the mirror and seeing a board for a booty? I've been coaching for nearly a decade, helping thousands of women reach their goals. The most common goal? Grow my glutes. Women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s able to grow their glutes with the guidance of my training programs. And for all this time, I've kept my best glute growth secrets only for my one-on-one clients. And that changes today. We just released our 12-week glute growth program in the PD training app. It is a 4-day program with exercise and volume adjustments every 3 weeks. You can easily access the program through our app and track every single workout. Each exercise will have a detailed video teaching you exactly how to perform each and every movement. And guess what? I am no longer gatekeeping. I'm sharing every single one of my best glute growth secrets inside this program because you are awesome and I want you to have this program. I'm going to give you $25 off, making it a fraction of what you spent at Starbucks this past month. Use code POD. The link to purchase will be in the description. Now let's get back to the show. Now that I'm in my deficit and you are getting into your calibration phase, what are you focusing on within your calibration phase?
I first started off with just focusing on consistency for my steps because I really wanted to accomplish something without fully being like, I need to change everything. And I kind of just needed that boost of you're going to keep this promise to yourself and you're able to do it. Because I was honestly going back and forth on, is this actually the right time for me to diet? Do I just need to be more consistent within the habits that I have in place? What capacity and bandwidth do I have for these things right now? And so I wanted to start with something I knew that I could accomplish. And I was like, all right, we're going to have more consistency with steps and get those consistently at a minimum of 8,000. And so once I got that done, I started to kind of plot out, I do feel like I have the capacity for this. So what are the next steps I'm going to do? And so then I went to being able to start increasing my training session length a little bit. So I was doing 2 to 3 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes. And then I've gone to 3 times a week. So crazy. I didn't jump to 4, 5, 6. I just went to 3 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes. And I've started to like increase the weights that I'm using and challenge myself a little bit more when I didn't have the ability to recover from that previously. And then I was really working on sleep as well, because we were in the same bad habit of working too late and staying up too late. And football season also contributed a little bit to that. So I was getting into just getting my sleep back on track, because I knew that I would need that come going into a deficit. And like I already mentioned, of getting meal timing into place. So once I had gotten those things, all of those in a better spot, then I started tracking my food again. So I didn't even start with tracking my food, because I honestly was the most resistant to that of it, because that felt like the hardest thing for me, of having to consistently track it. Even though I eat very consistently, it just felt I was kind of even battling of, do I need to be tracking my food right now? And I ultimately had the conversation with myself of like, you need at least a baseline of where this is at. So you have kind of a checkpoint with yourself of, even if you don't track your food every single day, being able to know what it feels like to eat at this intake consistently is going to be very important. And so I actually getting into tracking has been a little bit easier than I thought, but I think a big part of that is because I had been able to get the other habits into place, have that confidence with myself, because like truly how you have confidence with yourself is keeping promises to yourself. And so just being able to like check off each thing of like, I'm doing better, I'm working towards this goal, then got me to this place of tracking doesn't feel that difficult, because I'm also not trying to do it on top of doing 12 other things. I've already established those things, and then being able to get into the tracking of my food altogether, and being able to get that rolling. So it's been very similar to yours. I just had to go about it in a little bit of my own way, in regards to knowing myself. And again, what was going to be the biggest barrier for me. And I sometimes have to decide of that either has to be the first thing that I do so I can just get it over with, or it's going to be the last thing. So I've built up some of that confidence to be able to be like, okay, I can do this. So I was able to go between those sides of myself and take those steps forward. So I'm feeling good and getting into it, and I'm excited to see how it goes.
One of the big things to drive home within using the calibration phase is that you're avoiding creating this big overhaul of your life. And I think that by trying to overhaul your life, getting into a deficit, making all these abrupt changes is another reason why many people fail in seeing the fat loss that they want to see. And so using the calibration phase, you can have the focus on singular points and then build off of those and kind of use them as momentum to get yourself into the best place. And so I think that the way that you're going about it is excellent.
Wow. I'm glad you feel that way, because I'm kind of an expert at these things. So, well, here's to both of us crushing our phases and getting things into it. So now that you're one day into the diet, I mean, are you just so jazzed for everything to come?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I think it's going to be tremendously successful. I have, some general targets that are in place, but overall, my big focus is just being able to share throughout the process. I have been notorious in times past where I've been afraid to share, out of like, I'm not lean enough, or this isn't going exactly textbook, and so I don't want to share it right now. And I just want to share throughout the entirety of it. And if I share from start to finish and it doesn't even go well, I'm still happy. Like, as long as I shared about it, that's really all I care about. The success is going to come, and it's going to come from the consistency, obviously, but I'm looking forward just to being more open. And I think it's an opportunity for me to push past some, whether it be like self-belief barriers or just internal barriers. I think that's a cool opportunity for me ahead.
And when was the last time that you did diet?
It had been 2 years since I dieted last, and the last time that I had dieted was when we did the Leaner Together series on YouTube, going into our 5-year wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. So, don't have a sweet trip like that planned.
Maybe we should book one.
Maybe. We have a lot of great comedy shows coming up, and I'm ecstatic about that. We're getting to see a handful of our favorite comedians over a 10-day period at different times, which is just electric, and I am so ecstatic.
And one of them even starts at 9 p.m.
I know. So, it's very outside of our our norm.
It's going to be something else.
You will understand our humor as soon as I start to say names if you're a comedian fan, because we kick off with Dave Attell, which is just going to be, oh my,
it's going to be incredible.
So
and,
funny.
I mean, Columbus really doesn't have a comedy scene. So when
yes, it does. Good comedians
come here.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's not like we have like a bunch of open mics and like smaller comedy stuff, you know?
We're going to see Dave Attell, Tim Dillon.
I'm so excited.
Amongst many other great comedians
Tim Dillon
coming up.
Is one of the funniest in person. I mean, he's like one of the funniest in general.
Yeah.
Some people will find him very offensive, but he is hilarious in person. This will be our third or fourth time seeing him in person.
Yeah, third time seeing him in person. It is quite the skill. He does a podcast completely by himself, never has guests, and just has his producer rattle off stuff that's going on in the media, and he riffs and makes you laugh for the entire hour that he's on there.
It's so impressive that he just does it and speaks to himself the whole time.
It is exactly him probably talking to himself in the shower.
Literally.
Exactly that. And then he's 10x funnier with his stand-up. And a lot of that is riffing too. I mean, he's just a very talented person. And then we see the Kill Tony Killers is what they're calling themselves, which is one of my absolute favorites right now. I was asked the other day, and let me look this up, because I was asked my top 5 comedians, and I thought that this would be valuable to share, because I thought this was surprising.
I'm very interested.
Do you want to take a stab at who you think my top 5 was?
At who you think they were. Tom Segura is obviously on there.
Number 1.
Yeah. And then I'm going to say that Tim Dillon is on there.
Yep.
All right. Then I'm going to say, I don't think like Joe Rogan, you don't look at him as a comedian, so he's not on there.
No. Do not disrespect him like that.
No,
I look at him as a comedian.
You look at him as a comedian, but as far as like...
He's not like a top 5 to me.
Yes. I apologize, Joe Rogan. You were obviously listening to this
Of course
clip,
he's listening.
And I don't want you to think that Alex doesn't view you as a comedian.
Thank you.
So we have Tom Segura. We have Tim Dillon. Then I'm assuming Ari Maddie is on that list because you were just talking about that. Then is Tony on that list?
No.
No, because we're just talking about like
just talking about stand-up.
So then is Kevin Hart on that list for you? A few years ago.
He wasn't even my honorable mention.
Oh, wow. Have we seen them in person?
This is going to give it away, but we're about to see one of them.
Dave Attell?
Yeah, Dave Attell. And then the last one he just did SNL.
Oh, yeah.
So my top 5 is Tom Segura's number 1, and then the next 4 are in no order, but Shane Gillis, Dave Attell, Tim Dillon, and Ari Maddie would be my top 5 right now. Ari Maddie making it into my top 5.
He's real funny.
He's hysterical. And then my honorable mentions were Dave Chappelle, Nate Bargatze, Joey Diaz, Chris DiStefano.
Chrissy D. Yeah, when we were saying the word chaos earlier, it took everything in me to not be like, Chrissy Chaos.
So you can probably pull from those people of what my humor is.
So we are very excited for that. And yet again, I meant to do this at the beginning of the episode, but it's now the end of the episode. And I'm going to tell you to like, comment, subscribe, share this with a friend, all of that jazz. But we hope that you guys do calibration periods, not recalibration, calibration phases before deficits for yourself, and follow along Alex on Instagram for his deficit.
Let's do it.
Bada bing, bada boom.
See you guys.